It was supposed to be a good thing that we did, a chance for the younger kids to have some fun. How were we supposed to know our disappearances would enact a centuries-old curse?
The whole thing was our idea, me, Jake, Emily, and Sam. We pooled our money, rented a bus, and took every kid in town to the carnival 2 hours away. It was supposed to be a fun night. Cotton candy, dizzy rides, neon lights. And for a while, it was. Then we came home, and everything was wrong. The bus pulled into town just after midnight. The younger kids had fallen asleep, heads resting against the windows, but as the bus rolled to a stop, I noticed something strange. No parents were waiting. The streets were silent. No porch lights, no barking dogs, nothing. A 4-year-old girl, Maisie, rubbed her eyes. "Where's my mommy?" she whispered. I turned to Jake, unease twisting in my gut. Something's not right. We split up. Me and Jake took Maisie and a few of the other little kids home. Emily and Sam went in the opposite direction. Maisie's house was dark, all the windows shut. No sign of movement inside. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. Finally, Jake turned the doorknob. It was unlocked. Maisie's voice was small. "Mommy?" We stepped inside, and there, standing in the middle of the kitchen, was her mother. She stood completely still, back straight, arms limp at her sides. Her eyes were open, staring at the wall. I felt my stomach twist. "Mrs. Carter?" I tried. She didn't blink, didn't move. Maisie ran up to her, tugging at her dress. "Mommy?" Nothing, like she was empty. Jake grabbed my wrist. "We need to go." We turned back toward the door, and then Mrs. Carter moved. Her head snapped toward us, the motion too quick, too sharp. Then, finally, she spoke, but not with her lips. Her voice came from deep in her throat, like an echo, like something was forcing the words out. "Go back," she whispered. My blood turned to ice. Jake grabbed Maisie, pulling her away, and Mrs. Carter smiled. Too wide, too wrong. Like she wasn't smiling at all, like her face had been pulled into the shape of one. We ran. We met back at the school with Emily and Sam. Their faces were pale. "They're all like that," Emily whispered. "Just standing there," Sam added, "not talking, not moving, until you try to leave." Jake was breathing hard. "This isn't normal," I swallowed. "It's like they aren't really them anymore." Silence fell over us. Then Emily whispered, "What if it happened while we were gone?" I shook my head. But how? It was just a few hours. No one had an answer. Then, Sam looked up. His voice was barely a breath. "Guys, look!" We turned. At the far end of the street, the adults were standing there, all of them, watching us. They didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared, their bodies rigid in the dim glow of the streetlights. Then, they all took a single step forward. I gasped. Maisie started crying. We backed away, but they stepped forward again, in perfect unison, like a single hive mind. Jake grabbed my arm. "We need to hide." The only place with a lock strong enough was the school. We ran, dragging Maisie and the other kids behind us. I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. Finally, the door swung open. We rushed inside, locking it behind us. Then, silence. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a thud. Then another. The sound of footsteps on pavement. Getting closer, I crept to the window and saw them, standing just beyond the fence line, waiting. Jake whispered, "They're not trying to get in." I swallowed. Not yet. We needed answers. I pulled out my phone, searching for anything about the carnival, and then I found it. An old news article. My hands shook as I read aloud. 20 years ago, a traveling carnival came to a small town in Kansas. The children went, but when they returned, every adult in town had changed. They were found standing in their homes unresponsive, empty. The town was abandoned within a month. I looked up, heart pounding. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. It happened before, and now it was happening again. The adults stayed outside, watching, not speaking, not blinking. We huddled in the school, keeping the little ones calm. Then, At 3:12 a.m., something changed. They all turned at once and walked. Not toward us, not toward the houses, toward the woods. Sam breathed, "Where are they going?" I didn't know. But I knew one thing. We had until sunrise to figure out what happened, because if we didn't, we'd end up just like them, and this town would be forgotten just like the last one. The sun is rising now. The adults haven't come back, and I don't think they ever will. But the kids? They're still here, and I'm starting to wonder if that's exactly how this was meant to happen. Because maybe this town isn't ours anymore. Maybe it never was. The library was silent, too silent. No librarian, no lights humming, just the soft shuffle of my footsteps as I made my way through the dust-covered shelves. I had spent every summer in this library growing up, but now, with the town abandoned, it felt more like a graveyard. I pulled out a chair and flipped through old town records, my fingers shaking. Then, I found it. A journal, handwritten by a man named Thomas Grayson, one of the town's oldest historians. And, inside it, I found the truth. The curse. In the year 1693, a girl named Eleanor Hayward was accused of witchcraft. She was only 13. The townspeople dragged her to the square, tied her to a stake, and set her aflame. Her final words were a curse. The day the children leave this town, even for a moment, the adults shall vanish from this world. They will know what it is to be forgotten. My breath hitched. I flipped ahead. Generations passed, and no one ever left. Then, nearly a century later, something happened. A group of children wandered past the town border. When they returned, they found their parents staring at walls, not eating, not speaking. Days later, they were gone completely. The town repopulated, and the cycle repeated. Over and over again. I slammed the book shut, heart pounding. We had triggered the curse. And if I didn't stop it, the adults would disappear forever. I rushed back to the school, my pulse hammering. Jake, Emily, and Sam were huddled near the map of our town. I tossed the journal onto the table. "We're cursed," I said, breathless. Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" I pointed to the passage. Emily read it aloud, voice shaky. When she finished, silence fell over the room. Then Sam exhaled. "So, you're telling me we caused this?" I nodded. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Then how do we fix it?" I hesitated. And then I told them. The final entry in Grayson's journal. There was only one way to break the curse. We had to find Eleanor Hayward's remains and bury them properly. We spent the next 2 hours searching. The journal said Eleanor's remains were never given a proper burial. Her ashes had been scattered in the woods. Jake shuddered. "You mean where they went?" He meant the adults. The moment they vanished, they had all walked into the forest. I swallowed hard. "We have to go in." Sam frowned. "And if we don't find her?" I hesitated. Then I turned the page of the journal and read the last warning. If the children fail to restore her, the town will never break free, and they will become part of the curse next. The woods were silent. No wind, no birds, like the whole world had stopped. The deeper we went, the worse it got. Then, we saw them, the adults, standing between the trees, not moving, not blinking, frozen in place, waiting. Emily gripped my wrist. "Lauren." Then I saw it, a circle of scorched earth, like something had burned there centuries ago, and in the center, a single white bone. "This is it," I whispered, "the remains of Eleanor Hayward." Sam knelt beside it, digging into the soil with his hands. We had to bury her properly, to give her the peace she was denied. Jake pulled a silver locket from his pocket. "It was in the records room," he said softly. "It belonged to her." He placed the locket beside the bone and covered it with earth. Emily whispered, "What now?" Before I could answer, the air shifted. A cold wind rushed through the trees, and then the adults breathed. One by one, they blinked, looked around in confusion, like they were waking up from a long dream. My parents, the teachers, the store clerks, they were back. It had worked. The curse was broken. For the first time in centuries, the town was free. I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through me. But then, I saw her. A girl in an old tattered dress, standing at the edge of the woods, watching us. She caught my eye. Then, she smiled and disappeared into the trees. The town moved on. No one remembered what happened. The adults acted as if they had just woken up from a nap, but I remembered, and every now and then, at night, when I pass by my mirror, I swear, for just a moment I see Eleanor Hayward's reflection, smiling, watching, waiting. It started small. Jake couldn't remember his little brother's name. Emily forgot where she lived. Sam stared at a picture of his own parents like they were strangers. And me, I forgot my birthday. I told myself it was stress, that breaking Eleanor's curse had messed with our heads, but deep down, I knew. Something was wrong. Eleanor had been trying to save us, and now, she was gone. I ran back to the library. The place was empty again. I rushed to the historical archives, searching for Thomas Grayson's journal, the one that told us about Eleanor, but it was gone. Not misplaced, not missing. It had never been there at all. Every record of the curse faced, like it had been erased from time. I gripped the edge of the shelf, heart pounding. If there were no records left, that meant I was the only one who remembered. And soon, even I wouldn't. I had to find out the truth, before it was too late. Thomas Grayson had died years ago. A new family lived in his old farmhouse now. I couldn't explain to them why I needed to get inside, so I had no choice. I had to sneak in. That night, I waited until their lights went out. Then I climbed through the attic window. Dust coated everything. Stacks of old papers, boxes filled with forgotten knowledge. I searched frantically, until I found them. A pile of handwritten notes, scrawled in shaking ink. And when I read them, my blood turned to ice. We had made a terrible mistake. Do not break Eleanor's curse. She was trying to save the children. I have studied this town for decades, and I have finally uncovered the truth. The curse is much older than Eleanor. It happens once every century. The children, they begin to forget themselves, and then the parents lead them into the woods, to the cave. Where they are taken, the creature in the dark demands them, and in return, the town flourishes. The fields grow rich, the soil never dries, the livestock never die. But Eleanor's curse stopped it. She saved the children, taking the adults instead. And now that she's gone, there is no one left to protect them. I let the papers fall from my hands. We had doomed ourselves. Eleanor wasn't the villain. She was the only thing keeping us safe. And now, the children were being led into the woods. I ran back to town. The streets were empty. The houses were silent. I pounded on Jake's door. "Wake up! Wake up!" He opened it, rubbing his eyes. Then he blinked. "What's wrong?" I gasped for breath. "Where's your brother?" His face went blank. "My brother?" I grabbed his shoulders. "You told me yesterday you had a little brother. You forgot him." Jake's eyes widened. Then, realization hit. We ran to the school where the younger kids had been staying, but the doors were wide open, and all of them were gone. We searched the town. Nothing. Then Sam pointed toward the woods. A faint glow flickered through the trees. A procession of lanterns. Adults, leading the children deeper into the forest. I grabbed a flashlight. "We have to stop them," Jake swallowed. "And if we can't?" I exhaled shakily. "Then we die trying." We ran through the woods, our feet pounding against the dirt. The further we went, the stronger the smell of damp earth became. Then we saw it. A massive cave entrance, yawning open in the ground. The adults stood in a circle, chanting softly. The children, eyes glazed and empty, walked inside. One by one, Jake made a move to run forward, but I grabbed his arm. Wait! Something was moving inside the cave. A shape, massive and inhuman. Then I saw them. The bones, scattered along the edges of the cave. Small bones. Children's bone. This had been happening for centuries. And now, it was happening again, unless we stopped it. "Hey!" I shouted. The adults turned. Their faces were blank, empty. They weren't themselves anymore, just like in Eleanor's time. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I grabbed a burning lantern and threw it into the cave. The flames rushed to life. The creature inside let out a horrible, unnatural shriek. The ground shook, and the spell was broken. The adults stumbled back, their eyes clearing. The children blinked, realizing for the first time where they were, and the thing inside the cave burned. For the first time in hundreds of years, it was dead, and the cycle was over. The town recovered. People woke up, not remembering what they had done. The children were safe. The fields were dying, the crops withering. But for the first time, we were free. And in the forest, at the edge of the burned cave, I saw her, Eleanor Hayward, standing in the trees, watching. Then, slowly, she smiled and vanished. Her job was finally done, and so was mine.